Welcome back. Let's continue down the budget path, and we're going to talk fixed or static budgets versus flexible budgets. And there's a logic between doing both or analyzing both. If we look at a static budget, the original operating budget is pretty fixed. Here's our revenue, here's our cost of goods sold, here's our other expenses, here's our profit. But what happens if we exceed our sales by 10%? Don't you think our cost of goods sold is probably going to go up close to 10%, or at least in the ballpark? What happens if we kept the same old cost of goods sold, but we had a lot more sales? Well, we would have some pretty favorable sales ratings. And then if we have pretty unfavorable cost of goods, because our cost of goods is going to go up, even though we're budgeting on the original quantity we were producing, which is where a flexible budget comes in. Flexible budget looks at a variety of scenarios. So let's look at the scenario if our sales increase by 10%. Let's look at another scenario if they increase by 20%. Let's look at a different scenario if they're down by 10%. And we're going to match the cost of goods sold to that, because if their sales are down, we're going to buy less stuff. If sales are up, we're going to have to buy more stuff. We're going to have different levels of performance, and those variables are known as a flexible budget. And they will be adjust to a certain level of production to go with that. While a static budget, being pretty fixed, does not allow us to make any variation. Well, it sounds like the static's easier to maintain because I got a fixed budget. I don't have to worry about options or differences. And you would be correct. But the flexible budget is going in and saying, well, we do need to account for different levels of performance. And with those different levels, the numbers will change and follow suit. A little more complex, a little more analysis involved, but a lot more effective information is deduced. So let's take a static budget example. Direct materials, so many yards, direct labor, so many hours per, variable overhead, fixed overhead, we're good to go. Here's our manufacturing cost. Total manufacturing cost in this situation came out to $8,400. Okay. On a flexible budget, we start saying, well, our actual and our, if we're looking at units, well, we originally scheduled 800 units, but we produced 850. Well, with direct materials cost, direct labor, variable overhead, we're going to have a variation for those 50 extra units produced. So now we have new dollar amounts for direct materials, new dollar amounts for labor, new for variable overhead. Fixed, by the way, will usually be pretty consistent. Then we get to standard costing. And again, I mentioned standard costing in a previous video, and I said, well, what if it costs 10 cents a pound is what we anticipate, and it actually cost 12 cents a pound? Or we had $24 an hour, and we actually ended up only averaging $22 an hour, or $26 an hour. Maybe we had some more experienced folks, or maybe there was inflation, or whatever other causes. They would impact our budget because we start with standard. So standard costs are based on efficient operations and realistic expectations. They're not dreams. They're not something we aspire to. They are actually what we pretty much expect to happen as far as where we're going. Tight standards, we try to motivate employees towards high level production. So more likely that's with an imposed budget. That's a top-down budget we talked about before. Less likely to occur in a participatory budget. So top down, you can actually just dictate some of what you think may be, but bottom up, there's a little bit looser, a little bit easier to get to, a little bit more attainable, and something we want to be aware of. So this concludes our discussion of flexible budgets versus static budgets. We're going to be emphasizing the flexible budget side of things because that really does give you more accurate results. Again, is a little bit more involved in the process, but it does give you the opportunity to adjust your costs to various levels of performance. Thank you for listening, and we'll go ahead with our next element.